Okay, hi everyone. So my name is Ephantas Kanyuge. I am the Vice President of the Data Labelers Association. And first I would like to start by thanking all of you for attendance and being patient with us. This is actually our first event. And we are grateful for everybody for being patient with us also with time. So everything has been leading to this document. Before we get there, so people who want access to these documents, in the event module page, you will see a tab that is written media, and under media you can access both of the documents. Also for questions and comments, there's also a tab that is written Q&A, and you can upload your questions, you can upload all your comments on there. That way we'll have them even after the event is over, so that you can use that for improving on the documents. So in respect of time, I'll try to rush through the code of conduct, try to go through it as fast as possible so that you can engage on it, and then see how it goes. Okay, so for preamble, so the code of conduct outlines ethical and professional standards for data labelers, annotators, and content moderators engaged in training data for AI and machine learning. So the reason we came up with the code of conduct is because we understand that changing of law is a very slow process, and therefore we wanted to create what we would refer to as a bandage for the situation. And we tried to be very realistic in terms of interventions and solutions that we could come up with that could be digestible to employers, but actually create an impact to workers. So the goal of the code of conduct is, one, to safeguard the dignity, safety, and rights of workers. It also helps to promote fair labor practices and sustainable development. It is to ensure high quality and ethical AI outputs. And finally, to advance the recognition of data workers as essential contributors in the AI value chain. So this code is voluntary, but is a voluntary but binding commitment by all parties in the data labeling ecosystem, including platforms, BPO companies, and clients, to uphold worker rights and ethical data practices in the absence of fast-moving legislation. Yeah. So to move swiftly, we go to the first point, which is respect for workers' rights. So the first thing we thought about was fair compensation. We had a presentation from the wage indicator, where they actually did research on this. So workers must receive fair pay that meets or exceeds local living wage standards. We tried to make the code of conduct sort of adaptable to different regions. It's why we don't specify the amount, but it is seconded by research that's been done by the wage indicator organization. So the first thing we want workers must receive fair pay that meets or exceeds local living wage standards. It also includes timely payments with no hidden fees or deductions, and reflects task complexity, time intensity, and cognitive and emotional toll. Usually you're just paid for tasks. In my situation, in my experience, you'd find that you don't even know how much you're going to be paid for a task. So you just work on it, and then you get insignificant pay. You get like you worked for a whole day and then get paid a task at $0.04. It's not even enough to buy salt. So we find that there's a lot of issue in terms of not knowing what the pay will be, so that is stressful. You also don't know when you will be paid. We have tasks that have been in review from 6 months ago. And so some of these issues are what we are trying to address through the code of conduct. Also, we do not know for a fact, but we find that a lot of work is actually done through training. So what you do, you get training scenarios. I get a different task, someone else gets a different task, and the training is not paid. So what we find is that you're actually working, you're actually completing tasks, but then that work is not being paid for in the context of that this is training that you're doing. So Found that training is a crucial component of work. Where training involves more than 3 training tasks or scenarios, it could be more, and it must be compensated as paid work. Any test or qualification tasks that are indistinguishable in effort and complexity from real work must also be paid, and then real work must also be paid. Under contracts, especially if you're working on a platform, you get the, what's it called? The user what? I understand and agree to these terms and conditions, basically. Usually there's no contract. Or if you're getting a contract, you get what is referred to as an independent contract, which now excludes the worker from benefits. So you do not get insurance, you do not get leave, you do not get paid leave, and things of that nature. So under that, we say that workers must be provided with written contracts that clearly state payment terms, the task expectations, working hours, data protection policies, and dispute resolution procedures. Especially under the working hours, you find that typically you're supposed to work for 8 hours, but then you have targets. So they give you extreme targets, and therefore you're forced to work way past the stipulated time that you're supposed to work in. And that is not compensated. So you find that you get unrealistic targets, so the amount of work that you're doing is extreme. You do a lot of work. The contracts should also be written in plain language that workers can easily understand. Contracts must be made available before the start of work with sufficient time for review. As Joanne said, you get a contract, it's a 35-pager, but then you're told, hey, we need this signed by the end of the day, but you're in your shift, or you're given 30 minutes to sign a contract, and all it has is, as we are calling it, legalese. It's such difficult language that you do not understand. There's so much wherewith, therefore, such terms, yeah. The contracts should also be issued in both physical and soft copy formats, with workers retaining their own copies. So for this, we actually worked for a company, not to mention names, but then they offer you the contract in their work email, and you cannot download it. So what happens is, when you get fired, you no longer have access to that email, and therefore you no longer have access to the contract that you are working with. And they make it so that you cannot download it. You cannot even take screenshots of it. Whenever you try it, the screen just goes black, so maybe the best you can do is just take a picture. But I think a lot of people don't think about that when they're getting a job or they're getting the contract. So that's why we say that we would like to be issued with a physical copy or make it downloadable. And then also the soft copy formats where workers can retain their own copies for reference and protection. Next, it's project transparency. So workers have the right to know who the client is, unless restricted by legitimate confidentiality obligations, and to understand the intended purpose, use, and impact of the project that they're contributing to. We have worked, especially in data collection. We get a project where a company tells you that, hey, we want pictures of a child between the age of 1 year and 10 years, doing cartwheels, being changed a diaper, child's playing in the field, a child crying. But then we don't really know, or they don't tell you what they're doing with this data. So for that, we would like transparency. We would like to know what this information is being used for, just so that we understand what we are actually getting ourselves into. And then platforms and BPOs companies must foster a culture of informed consent by sharing this information at onboarding or prior to task acceptance. I think for this mostly applies to content moderators in the sense that they were told that, hey, you'll get into this job to be, I believe they are told they will be customer support agents, but then you get in and you find that you're actually working on content moderation, which is something entirely different. And you only get to know about it after you signed a contract, you've been onboarded, you've already gone through training, but then you get to work and you find that it's something different. To the next point, workers should have freedom of association and collective action. So workers have the right to organize, join unions or worker associations and engage in collective bargaining. Platforms or BPOs must not retaliate or penalize workers for engaging in such activities. And then worker representation in platform decision must be actively facilitated. We've seen this where companies actually say that we have a lot of people in the waiting list, and therefore, if you don't get in line, then we are sorry, but we have to let you go. Or alternatively, if you seem like you're consistently speaking up for some reason, you just see that, hey, you have a strike in performance, and then eventually you're let go. So they do use, intimidation. You find that they use bad tactics where they're trying to play with your accuracy or your work or your throughput just to make sure that they can justify why they took you off the platform. To the next one. I'm just trying to rush through the document because it's a bit long. We have safe and supportive working environments. Exposure to distressing and harmful content must be voluntary. So you see, in platforms, sometimes you're just working on an image. I was just drawing a table for boxes around a table. And then a new project comes, I've done training, and then the next one is about pornography. And the sad bit is I can't skip it, because if I do, then I'll be flagged and I can no longer work on any other project. Therefore, my choices are to either work through this work without consent or get offboarded off the platform. And so in most cases, because of the economy and the situation that is there, you just find that you just try to work through it. So we want explicit content warnings must be provided for tasks involving harmful and distressing content alongside mechanisms to opt out of exposure to such content. We also want psychosocial and mental health support. And this must be provided during the workers' engagement period and continue for a duration of not less than 3 months after termination. And then mental health resources must be professional, accessible, and confidential. On this point, we know that some companies actually use the mental facilities. You see, when you go speak to a counselor, for some reason, you find that the information that you shared with the counselor goes to the team lead and they start, monitoring you. It's like, we know that you're speaking negatively about the company and therefore you're on thin ice, see? So people cannot just go and speak openly to the psychologist. And then also you find that for most platforms, especially when you're working on a platform, you just get whenever you click your machine, it's on, you just work through the whole day, and then you switch off your machine, but then there's no support or there's no facilitation for any of the mental health support that you get. So it's just, you just deal with your own things. And unfortunately, they pay so little that you can't even pay for the service by yourself. So we are, as Jerry was saying, we are asking, but not asking, that you provide mental health resources just to help the workers. Don't create a generation of adults, the next generation of adults who can't function. People are suffering from back pain, depression, anxiety, and all these things. Next, we move to data ethics and privacy, where we are talking about confidentiality and data protection. So workers must maintain strict confidentiality about the tasks that they undertake and the data they handle. This is, of course, in respect to the companies. This document, we tried to be considerate to both sides. So us as workers, we must also respect the companies and try to maintain confidentiality with the work that we are doing. But then platforms and BPO companies must also train workers on data protection principles and responsibilities. Second, we need informed consent. So any personally identifiable information of workers or data subjects must be handled in compliance with the Data Protection Act, Cap 411C, the EU General Data Protection Regulations, and any other relevant data protection laws. Workers must also be informed of how their own data is collected, used, stored, and shared. In this regard, we actually figured, or we know for a fact, that whenever you're working, you need to have your webcam on for some projects. And then for most people, you're just living in a bedsitter, which is like a studio apartment. And therefore, everything that you have and everything that you own is in the same space.